Hi everyone and welcome to the Warhammer podcast. We're your hosts, Jack
and Dan.
And today we're going to talk about Warhammer's most unloved models.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we hate them? Do we love them? Games Workshop hates them.
I think, well, that's it. I mean, Warhammer 40k is meant to be a rich universe, but it feels a little bit like GW is trying to restrict our choice on the tabletop.
Right.
I think if we're right, if whole subsections of our factions have been shunned in some cases, it's fair to ask, are these Warhammer's most unloved models?
Yeah.
Before we get into that, though, make sure to give us your comments about what you think about this video, what you feel that GW is shunning in terms of your faction.
Yeah.
And please drop us a like and a sub. It'd be massive. Yeah. Thank you.
Massive help. Because there's basically the reason why I want to see some comments is because there's so many units that suffer from this unlovedness. That they deserve a shout out.
Neglect.
Neglect, exactly. There's lots in the Necron range and lots in the Tyranid range, but there's going to be lots more there. So let us know.
Well, let's get started then. Tell us, Jack, what's the problem?
Tell us what's the problem. What's the problem? You don't have enough time to know what all the problems are. But basically, in Games Workshop's other Games Workshop systems like Age of Sigmar and the Old World, they have big centerpiece models.
Yes.
Basically, they're encouraged.
Yes.
They want to see them on the field because, let's be real, they look amazing.
They do.
Some of the dragons and such we've seen in other showcases.
Goodness,
it's incredible.
Those big monsters are amazing, and they help to tell those stories on the tabletop, don't they?
Absolutely.
Good.
So while in 40k they're technically available in 40k, it's increasingly hard to get them on the table.
Yeah.
For multiple reasons. Multiple reasons. First one, models like the Baneblade tank for the Imperial Guard.
Yeah.
It is this big square/rectangle.
It's a big beast.
It's just huge. Getting that fella around buildings, now with obviously the pivot rule as well, you're losing out on distances you can move. It's just a nightmare to get around.
You got one of? Did you get one of them for Christmas?
Not this Christmas.
No.
Last Christmas. But I certainly have got one. And I've played it a few times.
Yeah.
And again, we'll get on to that later. But realistically, that model, first of all, nightmare. Let us know in the comments. I've seen it at a few tournaments and it's very stationary.
Yes.
And we've got the Tyranid, the Bio Titan.
Yes.
Which is there. I've seen that in a few tournaments we've mentioned on another video.
Yeah.
That just gets stuck. You can't move it.
Yeah.
The base is too big. We've got the Seraptic Heavy Construct for the
Necrons.
Necrons.
Same story, isn't it?
Same story. It is too big to get around, which super annoying. And the last one, this is the
Tantalus, yes, for Jakari. Yeah, it's their big boat. But again, it's just this one is slightly smaller than those, but it still can be a bit tricky to get around the table.
Yeah. Now a couple of those ones like the Bio Titan, I don't know how many points that one is. You couldn't get that in a 2K game most likely, but like there are lots of models out there like the Baneblade that can get in a 2K list, but simply are too awkward. Another Necron shout out could be the Tesseract Vault.
Yeah,
425 points.
Yeah,
it's fittable, but you are really restricted on where you can go and how you can get around. It's just not ideal. So that's the problem. I've got other problems, but we'll not get into that today.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about why we can't use them. I mean, we can use things like Tesseract Vault you can use in tournaments.
Yeah.
Unless something's in Legends, you can still use it in tournaments as well. So there is a halfway house for a few of these called Imperial Armor, which you might have seen as a tab on the when you go into a faction on the app.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of these reside. So they're not actually in the main codex, but you can still use them.
Because most Legends aren't in the app anymore.
No, Legends are not in the app. If it goes to Legends, they're not in the app. They are on a separate PDF, which is held in the download section on Warhammer Community.
Good luck finding it.
Yeah.
They love to hide stuff.
Yeah.
Very deep on that website.
Yeah. I mean, you can still use Legends in casual games, but the challenge even in casual games is, we've talked about this in other videos, but 40k, this edition requires a lot of line of sight blocking terrain.
Correct.
If you remove that to enable these big things to get around the board, you're creating massive firing lanes, which means whoever goes first is going to delete a load of stuff from whoever goes second.
Back in I think it was like 7th or 8th. I think that was rampant, wasn't it?
Up until about 7th, it was very much like that. Yeah.
Whoever went first, it was just game over.
Anything that's got a bigger than a large round oval base won't really fit easily between ruins. So like a monolith is kind of your biggest, and even then it's going to struggle a bit, isn't it? Necron monolith.
Luckily, we've got deep strike on that model to get it in those places, but then it's easier to screen out, so people can easily just block it out from coming in, which sucks.
So with all that said, does it feel like GW is deliberately discouraging their use in this edition of these bigger models?
It's so hard to say, because I don't want to say that they're deliberately doing it, because I think they're trying to find that balance between all of the armies. But you've briefly mentioned it before, they have such an issue where the terrain that they've got right now if they reduce it, well, if they reduce it, that's going to create those firing lines. So armies like Tau, maybe just all shooting men of Imperial tanks, they will just run rampant in the meta.
Yeah, if you had a gun line army with more firing lanes, then that would be the meta.
It'll obviously be the meta. If you increase the number of terrain, then tanks will suffer, Imperial Knights will suffer, because they then can't get around, and melee armies will be absolutely running rampant. Because melee profiles will have lots of places to hide, lots of places to get in your face.
Yeah, and it's all about that staging without being shot, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's kind of like, is it? No, I don't think they're deliberately doing this, but have they caused the issue themselves?
That seems to be the issue to me. Is I think they painted themselves into a corner. So in the 2000s, they went through this kind of phase of expanding on these ranges. So Necrons is a great example. I know we bang on about them because we play them, but it's a great example in that, like the richness of that codex still.
Yeah.
And then you had all this weird and wacky stuff in Forge World as well. It was there's loads of stuff going on there, and you've got
for sure.
And they went through a phase of trying to provide as much richness as that, which is good. But in terms of the game from the competitive scene, which let's be honest dictates the rest of 40k now,
it does.
Then they don't fit very well. So GW is like, how do we deal with this problem? And the way they deal with it, in my opinion, is that they make them virtually unplayable. Which is because there is not an easy way to square that circle. So you just have to say, well, for the sake of the rest of the game, we sacrifice this subsection of models.
And it's very important that you've mentioned about the tournament players, because I feel like Games Workshop are in this weird spot right now where I don't think they know who they want to cater for, because they used to do these meta watch videos, which we've briefly mentioned in the past. I love seeing what was being done about the meta. Where did everyone sit? Where did my army sit? And how did other armies fare in the current meta?
And they were quite open and honest about what they were going to address to fix problems at either end. Great communications.
I absolutely loved it. It was nice to see, but maybe they thought that was being too tournament driven. Was that a catering for them? So they've stopped those videos. But what was the reason for stopping them? Because they were good, they were insightful, and it was good communication. But they got rid of them, and now they got rid of the Seraptic heavy construct from the website. We've
just done another video about this on the Forge World stuff. But they are making more moves, which lead us to think that these models, the bigger units, are going to get less love rather than more.
And then they brought it back, but it's like pick a lane. Which one are you going to do? If you're going to bring that back, at least bring back Meta Watch, please. I like that. It was a good one.
I think Meta Watch and or a quarterly Q&A where people could ask them questions and they could they could address some of these issues. I think would be really good.
I think it'd be really fun.
I mean, from my perspective, I think GW, one of the things they do to the terrain wise, obviously it's hard to use these models in competitive games certainly, but I do think they're also typically priced quite high. They tend to be points wise as a price premium to try and discourage you from taking them as well, I think.
I mean, the Tesseract Vault's 110, and then that's 425 points.
And it's 110 quid, 115 quid.
It's like both elements. It's like, well, you can pay us really good money, or
I don't know what that is in American dollars, but it's US dollars. It's probably over 150.
145.
But the other thing that's worth talking about is that they're not alone. The big models is the obvious one, but I think another subsection that's experiencing similar lack of love is aircraft.
It's an interesting one because again they restrict a lot of what the aircraft can do. I mean, for example, some of the points that you can score exclude aircrafts from doing certain things.
Aircraft don't interact well with the game, do they?
Nah,
not the rest of the game. And that feels again like they're a little bit, and they seem to be points pricey. One of the only factions that I was aware of that was running aircraft was Drukhari, Dark Eldar, because their Void Raven bomber has some tasty damage 2 guns, which were great marine killers. So that there was a few people, but I think it was pioneered by Scary, who runs a channel called Scaridcast. I'll put a link in the description. Big channel, but he was running double Void Raven bombers, and so they just whacked the prices back up to stop people running them again.
How dare you?
Like, thanks.
How dare you? I mean, you ruined it for the rest of us.
I know. Obviously, they have to balance the game, but this instance, it just felt like
an attack.
It did. It just felt like them saying, "Well, we don't really want flying suppliers to be included.
How dare you find something that works and not us? So, we're punishing you.
So the aircraft, I think, is another area. But is there anything...
before you move on, actually,
go on.
You've just reminded me of some other units. Fortifications.
Oh, that's another one.
Good Lord. What have they done to my baby?
Yes.
Like, obviously the Necrons, again, we're Necron Trans, we're going to mention it.
Yeah.
But the Necrons have the Convergence of Dominion.
That's right, yeah.
Awesome looking models, but they can't move.
Yeah.
They have no OC.
Yeah. Can't go back into strategic reserves.
They'll give a semi-crap aura of,
it's a bad buff,
just a bad buff all around. It can get into melee if it gets charged, but it's not really good in it, and it's just why
it feels like lip service, doesn't it? Like rather GW doesn't know how to make it work, so they technically exist, but trying to run them is pointless.
Yeah, like is that a pun?
Yeah,
pointless.
well, I mean, with any unit there is a point price break, if you like, where the unit becomes so cheap that you go, right, I'm taking that now.
But just a natural include.
But the opposite is true, is if they keep those points a lot higher than the profile should dictate, then that will discourage you from taking them. So it's like a soft discontinue.
It is. I guess on top of that as well, to mention more units, another recent change that happened about a year ago now, or maybe just 6 months into the 10th, the Scarabs and any OC 0 units. So obviously in the past we used to have Necron Scarabs, Tyranids had the Ripper Swarms.
Yes.
Other units had, other armies had other things, but they made them OC 0. Now what that actually does to the game is that it makes those guys unable to do certain secondaries and certain actions.
They become a lot less useful. They can't hold objectives, can't do certain secondaries, and again, does their points reflect that?
Exactly. And is this because Games Workshop want to move away from that play style?
Yeah.
Are they dictating how we play the game?
Yeah.
Opposed to what units we can take?
It's called nudge theory, isn't it? Is it they nudge you one way or another using these levers? And that I hadn't actually thought about that, but I mean, there are ways you can get around it with Scarabs, like if they're near a Cryptek or a Catacomb Command Barge, you can give them OC, but
Ripper Swarms can't.
Ripper Swarms can't.
Obviously, we're lucky because we've got that, but there's other armies out there that can't. So
it's
worth mentioning because, I love my Scarabs. I love bringing 3 squads of 9 back in the day.
Well, there were 15 points a base in 9th edition, which was 45 points for 3, and in 10th edition they're 40 points for 3.
Yeah.
So they're only 5 points cheaper, but they have lost about 75% of their use.
And the good thing about it was you could bring squads of 9 instead of squads of 6. So it was like, how many wounds is that? 27.
They had 3 wounds a base, I think. It's 30, you've got 4 wounds a base now, and you can blow one up for free each turn as well. So I guess you could argue the case maybe they're priced about right. I don't know. But there's it's a good point to say that it does feel like you're being discouraged from using those units.
I don't like it.
Speaking of that, is there anything that GW can do to help bring back some of these unloved factions, sub-factions?
I was interrupting you because I was so excited.
Yeah, go on.
I think there is. I read down a few things that I think that they could do to basically allow us to keep the uniqueness, I think is the right way of putting it. Because these, like, obviously Forge World or like Scarabs that are really small.
Aircraft
there's ways to make them work, and maybe not for everyone, but first thing is, what if, bear with me on this one, what if they raised all of the points for all units out there by 10%, but leaving models the
big ones alone.
The big ones, maybe some aircrafts and such, because that makes it less space on the table to be screened out because you're bringing less units overall.
Yes.
The points wise make them more digestible or appetizing to field. And overall, Warhammer is expensive. You typically buy these big units so that you don't have to buy more of the little ones.
It's a very good point,
If they increase the price of 10 points for all of the units, that's less points you'd have to field on a table, meaning more 40k is less money. And we'll get onto more in detail on that later on in another section against Old World. But that is one idea where you just increase the points across the board. New terrain layouts, briefly mentioned it before. I think that this one would be really hard to do, but what if they allowed like certain units to be on top of buildings? Because nowadays, if your base is bigger than the certain terrain
if your base overlaps the terrain, the floor on the terrain, you can't sit on it.
Exactly. What if they changed just little rules that?
That's a good one,
what if they didn't force the pivot the
pivot's a bad rule.
The pivot is a bad rule.
Yeah.
What if they allowed it to fly over the board and then come off and come straight back on next turn? Little
there's a few
like
things
that.
you can do. I mean, flyers, you can, if you fly off the board, you can come on back on again. I think next turn.
In the next turn,
yeah.
But it's just, new size tables. That's a big one. What if you like extended the table to make it longer? Is that beneficial, or is the table size we've got enough? But if you extend it, it's more room for more models.
Because it used to be
for big models.
6x4. That's why a lot of the battle mats are still 6. By that I mean 6 foot by 4 foot. It's in old Imperial measurements, but the new ones are now 5 foot by 4.4 something, 4.5, yeah. So it's like 60 by 44 inches, which you could go back to the old OG of 6x4 and see if that would give you more room to get your models
just to get them round.
You're going to get, that's an interesting one, because you're not actually removing terrain. You could still have the same terrain layouts, but you will have slightly more firing lanes, but not, it shouldn't be too overwhelming.
Because again, if you spread it out,
just spread out a little bit,
then you can still get close enough to the enemy. Like, I mean, some armies, some melee ones, especially like demons and world eaters, they can get within turn 1 charge range already. In turn 1. So if you make it longer, you still have that.
It's going to favour gunline armies slightly, but it would be a way for you to agree with your friend to play more of these bigger units.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Don't come at me in the comments. This is just random ideas that I've had.
Yeah, some good ideas. Yeah,
but that's one of them. What if they resized or rescaled some of those models? What if we've seen a smaller Necron model, or if you've seen a Baneblade that was smaller on the tabletop? Because the reason why I got this idea for is because look at the Primarchs. The Primarchs are out now. Don't get me wrong; they are big. Put the Primarch next to a normal Space Marine, they are big models.
Yes.
But if you look at the lore, they're meant to be a lot bigger. A lot bigger in comparison.
That's a very good point. And it's like, it's a bit like the kind of, just that kind of sort of Catan scale or Knight scale gives you that flexibility to get around the table. 10th for Knights is feels really good, because you can get your Knights around the table, and the bigger ones can walk through buildings and stuff like that.
Definitely.
I've never really understood why a big tank can't drive through a ruin.
Yeah. As long as they can get past it.
Yeah,
it's like
there should be, should have the ability to drive through terrain. That could be another way to do it.
Like we've done that now for obviously the big Titanic Imperial Knights. Or like the super something on there, but they allowed to move over terrain and through terrain now.
You can move through terrain, and then you have to roll to see if you get battle shock.
For like on 1d6.
On a 1 year battle shock. Yeah.
Exactly. But the little ones still have to move around.
Yeah.
But it's still like, okay, I mean, I kind of get that, because maybe they're too small to kind of get over and break through it.
Yeah.
It's like,
but a Land Raider should not have to go, oh no, I can't, oh no, I've hit a ruin, I can't drive through this wall, I've got to reverse and pivot round here. Yeah.
What if there was like, obviously there's different terrain sets, so like, there's the 3-tiered ones, the 2-tiered ones, and like the ruins. What if they then said, the ruins and the 1-tier buildings you can drive through, but then the 2-tier and the 3-tier ones you can't.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Change
that'd be a nice. Yeah, I'd like to see that. I mean, they might have to tweak the points on some of them tanks because of that ability, but it would be. I think that's a really good solution.
Just different ways of doing it, I think.
Because the main issue we're talking about is mobility, isn't it? It's ability to get around the board, and if you can get around that with that hack, with that fix, that would be great.
Yeah, it was just so much neat. I think that they're the ones that just came in my head.
Yeah.
Late last night.
I like
I just think there's opportunity there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a really interesting one. What about ownership? Do you own or use any of these models?
I do. I have a Baneblade.
Yes.
Which I love.
Yeah.
I've played it a couple of times and struggled every time because either one or two things happen with the Baneblade. One, your opponent is like, I can defeat this. I can take this guy off.
Yeah.
And they jump out, they shoot all their guns, and they don't kill it. And it's like, right, I'm going to shoot my volcano cannon. It's like damage 12, 3 attacks, that's 30 or 36 wounds, yada, yada. So it's scary. But yeah, I've got one. I love it. I've played it a couple of times, like I say, but you just can't get it around the board.
Yeah.
You can't get through the terrain. You can't get it out of your deployment. You're going to have to rapid ingress it if you want to try and get it somewhere in the mid-board. But even then, you can't really kind of navigate it through all the terrain bits that are in the middle.
No.
See, it's at a bit of a loss, unfortunately.
And the this depends on where you play. If you're playing competitive terrain, because US typically run on GW layouts, which have a little bit less terrain.
Yeah.
So American viewers might be going, "What are you talking about?" But ITC, UKTC terrain setups, there's no way you're getting these around the border.
Not at all. Let me know if you're watching from the US who can move these bad boys around, but we can't in the UK.
I just saw an interesting post this morning. We're recording this before LVO, and it was some of the Vanguard Tactics guys getting some LVO practice games in on the GW terrain. Because Vanguard Tactics is obviously a UK company. They used to play on UKTC, and they were going. The LVO is on GW. So a couple of the guys had brought melee armies, and they'd worked out where the terrain is based. You can't stage. Like there is not enough. The gaps between the terrain is too big for the way that you would normally move your melee armies up the board to stay out of line of sight.
For the newer ones out there, what does staged mean?
So yeah, staging is when you start behind one piece of terrain and then you move to behind another line of sight blocking piece of terrain. So you're staging your army up the board ready to strike. So if you so it's vital for melee armies in the game. Yeah. Because otherwise you are walking them out into the open, and that's what they're saying about this GW setups. It's much harder. So there is it's a slight diversion there, but there are variations upon this.
Yeah. Now, do you own any big models out there?
No, I don't own any. I will get the Tantalus for the Dark Eldar because I love it, but I won't buy a Forge World one. I was looking at getting the China cast one. I know you're not meant to say that probably, but
keep it down, Dan.
So there's a guy I've played and I follow on Instagram. I really love on Instagram. He's called the Black Tower. He's called Rich, or if you watch the Daily Dice battle reports, it's Mustache Rich. He's a big Drukhari player as well. His friends bought him the China cast version of the Tantalus, and he said it was an absolute nightmare because none of the bits fit together. But it's because Forge World is notorious for this. What they do in China, the China cast, is they make a mold from the existing,
which is already
but it's already warped or whatever. So so it doesn't. Yeah, so it's,
man,
if you're going to get one, I think 3D print's the way to go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, beyond that, monolith is the biggest thing I probably own, and that's that. Anything, as I said, anything bigger than a monolith, you ain't getting around the table. So
you struggle to get the monolith round.
No, most big stuff you can't hide it from shooting. You can't move around the board. So I'm not actually using monoliths at the moment, but because Hypercrypt's slightly fallen out of favor a little bit.
Yeah, Star Shadows came up now, so makes sense.
So I don't own any. I would like the Tantalus just to own one because it's cool. But that's I'm not buying one from Forge World now. And I don't. My other factions, Space Marines, and most of their tanks are, that you're looking at Land Raiders is probably really the chunkiest boy, and that'll get around. It's designed. Most terrain layouts are designed to allow that to get around the board as well. So
it does. Yeah,
I don't have an issue with that.
No, that's fair. What about in terms of? Do you reckon GW are moving away from these bigger style models or these aircrafts?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think they're definitely scaling back on the big Forge World models. We just talked about that in another video, so I don't want to dwell on it too long here. But we'll put a link in the description.
Yeah.
But they've discontinued some of our Forge World models, Necrons, like Tombstones and Pylons, and I'm suspicious of where they put these units in the app. So. They are a lot of the bigger Forge World units that are not in Legends are still not on the Codex. They're in that halfway house we talked about before.
Yeah.
Which to me is a step towards moving them to Legends. Why would you do it otherwise?
It's sad to see.
Why would you separate it out from the Codex unless you were staging towards discontinuing it? It's all a bit sus as far as I'm concerned. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think I agree. Again, just the way their practices, the way they do stuff, always gets me on edge. Again, I mean the Grot tanks, for example, we mentioned it in the video again, but they came out in a Codex and then immediately just ripped them apart, and they weren't even big models.
No, they're little lovely little cute, little cute Grot tanks. I love them.
They fit the bill for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And even though they had all the tick boxes, they still removed them.
Yeah.
So whatever they have planned for models like fortifications that don't tick any boxes, what are they just keeping them there to?
I think they sound like the most obvious ones to discontinue because they don't interact well with the game. Aircraft don't interact well with the game.
No.
I think the bigger plastic kits, they're probably like a Tesseract Vault, are probably more likely to keep but I do think that my conspiracy theory here
we go. Tinfoil hats, everyone.
Is I do think that the really big Forge World stuff is going to go. completely.
Yeah.
And I think and then the next stage in size down, things are like, say, a Tesseract Vault size or that kind of size model that doesn't fit well with the game at the moment, that will go to Legends. I think in the 11th edition, I'll be amazed if we can play a Tesseract Vault
You reckon that early? Because that's only, what, a year and a half away now, right?
I really do, because I just don't think it's in GW's business model is not. I mean, the Tesseract Vault's already made to order. It's plastic kit, but
true,
you can only buy it from made to order or directly from the Warhammer World store.
Side note, I'm selling my Tesseract Vault. If anyone out there would like to buy it,
if it's not 11th, I think it'll be 12th. But I think there is definitely a trend towards taking some of that weird and wacky stuff out of the game because it doesn't work for competitive games.
We as Necrons haven't been hit as big as other factions like Space Marines for their firstborn. I know we lost a couple with the new Codex coming out. So I'm should we all be worried about what will hit our armies in different ways? Or
I think so. I mean it depends on where you sit, doesn't it? If you love big models and you love playing them, and you cannot lie, then you should be worried. If you're a competitive player, you've probably disregarded a lot of these models as unfeasible anyway, so you're probably not that bothered.
It's hard, isn't it? It's hard because I like the models in what they are now. I've got my top shelf, my glass cabinet over there of models that have been discontinued and
a lot of old Hammer and stuff like that. Yeah,
I cannot fit Tesseract Vault.
No.
So I really want to stick to the smaller ones than anything else. But fingers crossed they don't. But the more we talk about it, the more I can see it.
Yeah, we kind of talked ourselves around there. I do think there is a we can see a pattern there. It might be me incorrectly joining the dots, but it does feel like the really big Forge World, the big Titan-esque Forge World stuff is probably going to go at some point. And I do think then the next wacky phase down will be things like aircraft and that. Yeah. Aircraft almost feels like aircraft and big stuff need their own game. Like a different.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like
just a different game
kind of thing.
Yeah, like a Legion Imperialis, we could have that's just for something that's almost like just for vehicles.
Yeah,
where aircraft and the big stuff could interact much more. You needed less terrain.
Different game mode. So I could get behind smaller models to paint if they do like the miniature size.
Oh no, I mean I think they could do it 40k scales. Yeah, but I don't know whether it's feasible or not. And I just don't think they're that interested. Yeah. GW's obviously aim is to make as much money as it possibly can, which is fair enough. That's what all businesses.
It's a company.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Can you make once you've sold your one Tesseract Vault, you're probably not going to buy another one.
You can field free.
Yeah, you can. But they're probably, I think their profit is in volume, and volume is not in the big stuff.
Battle line.
Yeah, it's battle line in smaller vehicles and stuff like that. Yeah,
it's true. That is true. Unfortunately, there was one last thing I wanted to bring up.
Yeah,
which
this is a great point.
Semi on the point of like unloved models and such, but I really wanted to make a comparison between 40k and Old World because we briefly talked about big setup pieces. Old World loved big setup pieces.
Yeah, it's kind of been a mainstay of the game since it was Warhammer Fantasy back in the 80s.
Exactly. So I started looking a bit more into it, and I was like, well, what's the crack with like Old World? And I don't know too much about Old World.
Yeah, we don't play it.
We don't play it, but we do play 40k. And we know, and I've mentioned several times, 40k is expensive. And whenever we do breakdowns, we always talk about, hey, if you're looking for a bargain, this is the army that you should go for because you get the biggest points per pound for it. So bringing back the money element, because I know that's a big thing for a lot of families.
Yeah.
Old World is crazy in the way which they do it. It's crazy good. It's so much better in my eyes.
I thought you were going to go the other way for a second.
No. So obviously there's a couple of factors in play. So if we just run through what we've got. So the bigger models allowed 40 players to sometimes save a bit of money. So if you bring in the Tesseract Vault, that's a quarter of your army for
425 points. It's over 20% of your army.
Yeah. Whereas you spend.
I mean, a Baneblade must be nearly 500 points, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think the Baneblade's 480 points.
Right.
But obviously there's like 8 different variants. So
okay.
More. But yeah, so basically sometimes you basically field one big one for 480 points, and that would be a quarter of your army.
Yeah.
You'd save a little bit of money in real life, just to basically get some models.
Get you to 2K quicker and cheaper. Yeah.
Exactly.
Nice.
Now, if we compare 40k to Old World in terms of points, looking online, Combat Patrol boxes contain way more points in Old World.
Do they?
Massively. So, meaning you'd be spending less if you were to play Old World than you would for 40k. They also do not suffer from the unit count max being at 3.
Right.
So, if you were to buy like, there was a tower one that I found where if you were to buy, I think you needed 5 Combat Patrol boxes for Tau
to make 2,000 points.
Just to make 2,000
wow.
points. But
that's £500 in English money, isn't it?
Exactly. Which confirms what we've done in a video in the past about Combat Patrol magazines. And
yes.
stuff. But you can't field everything in that Combat Patrol magazine because eventually when you buy 5 of them, you're going to have at least 5 units of something like a tank.
So you're coming up against the rule of 3. Right, okay.
So you could buy 1, maybe 2 of the Combat Patrol magazines to have at least 2 or 3 units, but you're going to have to then buy some other units by itself, which add money on top of what you've already purchased. But if you look at Old World don't suffer the 3 unit cap.
Right.
And they contain more points in the box. So you can buy 2 boxes of again, there's obviously other armies out there.
Varies,
so it varies. But you can buy 2 to 3 boxes of the Old World Combat Patrol magazines and have a 2K list ready to go. And you can field pretty much everything in those boxes.
So you can basically buy, instead of you can buy 2 or 3 boxes of Old World and you're off. It won't be the most meta army, but that's not the point of Old World anyway, really, is it?
Exactly.
But it would get you to your 2,000 points, which is what all new players want to get to as quickly as they can, and as
because that's what everyone
cost
plays.
Effectively,
Exactly.
Unless you're extremely, unless you're very rich and you can afford to buy loads of stuff. But
not. I wish
there are some players in that position, but not many.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think they are a minority, aren't they?
Exactly, and Old World still allow upgrades, so you can upgrade your units, which are more points. Whereas 40k has moved away from that recently.
Yeah.
So if you have like the Tau battle suits, you used to be able to add on like additional flamers, and additional bits and bobs to make a unit that bog standard might have been like 130 points. You could have upgraded to like 190 to 200 points.
Yeah.
Old World still allow that, but 40k do not.
No.
So you can't upgrade it, meaning you need more units to build up those points.
Yeah, that's a really good. I hadn't considered that, but I'm pleasantly surprised that the Old World is cheaper in that respect. I suppose because the models are older and they own the molds and stuff, and it's a resin process or whatever, which all goes in its favour. I think one of the things that you've touched on there, which has happened to 40k as well, is the points values seem to have dropped.
Yeah.
Like Marines used to be quite an elite army.
Yeah.
And you can field a lot of Space Marines for 2,000 points now.
You certainly can. Same with Adeptus Mechanicus.
Yeah.
They were quite a unique models, and now they're cheap as chips.
You're fielding a lot of
Skitarii and such.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think that's it's a valid thing to point out. This might not relate to all models out there, like the Scarabs or some aircraft out there, but this really translates to the bigger models like the Tesseract Vault and the Monoliths and the Baneblades and such that you might have foregone. But yeah, it's an interesting take. You want to highlight that one?
I think I really appreciate that. I hadn't thought it's always good to get a perspective like that from a different game system from GW.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think if we're going to move on to like final thoughts, I suppose.
Scrap 40k.
Well,
we're moving to Old World.
Yeah.
We're going to be called instead of Warhammer, it's Old Hammer. The name's taken. Never mind.
I think Ardhammer.
That name's taken too.
That's an in-joke nobody will get apart from that lives in the northeast. So sorry about that.
Like 99% of our audience are there gone.
Shut up, Jenkins. I think. I'm slightly ambivalent about this. I don't mean to be a fence sitter, but from GW's perspective. They have to balance a game, a very highly complex, rich, and diverse game.
Taking their side.
But in order to do that, they are definitely pushing us to narrowing our choices through
stretching
points.
Our wallets.
Yeah, they're not insisting that you can't use these units, but they are finding game mechanics like points to make sure that, and abilities and stat lines and stuff to make these units less interesting or difficult to take.
I agree with that.
So I can see why they're doing it, but it's from a player's perspective, we want 40k in particular for the past, I would say, 20 years has kind of been removing a lot of the weirder and wonderful stuff, and that's part of the rich tapestry of 40k.
Yeah,
and these bigger units are one of the last, and aircraft, things like that are some of the the outliers and the things that keep 40k rich and interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't want to lose them.
No.
But I can see from GW's perspective why they're in this position.
I get your points. For me, again, this would all boil down to a simple solution of just communication. Those MetaWatch videos would have probably outlined why they're making these changes and doing this and that. And more of MetaWatch that might not even be related to tournaments, but just general. Hey, this is why we're making these balance changes. Yeah. We have seen an increase of 100% backing their changes up with data.
Yes,
is a thumbs up for me.
Yeah.
Whereas if they don't do that, this is where speculation comes out of other channels like us. We definitely speculate because we have to, but we speculate that, well, they're doing it to boost their profit margins, or they've not sold enough, 200 warriors, so they've brought out a new detachment.
Yeah. I mean, it does feel like that. It's like 40k is this wide, but if we just cut it and focus on this bit, we'll make more money.
Yeah.
And the game will become less. The game will become less rich and less complex in some respects.
Like a dull down.
It will be exactly. It will become a duller place. The 40k universe will become a duller place without some of these units. Mm-hmm. I mean, let us know what you think about that in the comments. Some of you might just absolutely hate aircraft and wish it never existed. I don't know.
Can't argue.
I think it's difficult to get away from the big aircraft, maybe fortifications.
Yeah.
If GW held a gun to our heads and said we had to get rid of 2 out of 3 of the things we discussed, I could let those go, I think.
Yeah.
I hope that's not a controversial take. But the big models, I want to see Bane blades on the table. I want to see some of the Forge World stuff on the table. Those really nice big set piece, centerpiece models. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, obviously, haven't you mentioned the Orcs ones with the big stompers?
Yeah, I've got one of them. I won. Actually, I keep saying, I won a stomper in a raffle.
Keep ruining it down. Look,
always enter the charity raffles. It supports a good cause, and you might win.
Very true.
But I mean, the Stompers are fantastic model.
Exactly.
Yeah. But you're not seeing a lot of them on the table
because they can't fit it on.
Yeah.
So we need more of them. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's. I think that's everything for me then.
Good. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that. It was a really interesting discussion from us. I hope we're kind of wrong and GW finds a way to make these work in the future.
100%.
But 10th edition, it feels very much like they're being excluded.
100%.
Let us know what you think, and thank you for watching. And we'll be back soon with another video.
Thank you.